Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well. As Damien mentioned earlier, this afternoon's talk is about remote connectivity into remote sites. Just to give you a bit of background, so I run the business unit in the UK and Ireland that looks at the industrial communication and identification portfolio. So that focuses on things like code recognition cameras, so cameras that can recognize 2D and 3D barcodes that you see on food and packaging and even on ink cartridges and labels. So on that cameras, we do projects like recognizing barcodes and dates on cans and tins. We can even recognize the pattern on steak bakes coming out of ovens from bakeries. RFID, which is the ability to read tags, so you can have a basket full of products or produce or equipment that has an individual RFID tag, and as that goes through a gate, we can read all that information. We also now have a product portfolio for Rtls, which is real-time location systems. That's the ability to track and trace devices down to about 20 centimeters over a wide area using a Wi-Fi type spectrum. Our main area, though, is the industrial communication, which is the Scalance and the Ruggedcom product portfolio, and that is switching, routing, firewalls, so layer 2, layer 3 devices, Wi-Fi, media converters, gateways, huge product portfolio, of which one area of that is remote access. So today I'm going to focus on some of the building blocks of remote access. I'm not going to go into great detail, because kindly Lewis has decided to do a demo. He did his demo this morning, that went really well. So fingers crossed his demo this afternoon will go as well. And so I'm going to focus on more high level, and then Lewis will do a deep dive. Please feel free to ask questions. We have a Q&A session at the end. So hopefully this will be of interest to you, and hopefully towards the end we can help answer some of your questions. So as I touched on, is that one of our remote systems, remote applications, is called Sinema RC, or Sinema Remote Connect. So in the presentation today, I'm going to briefly talk about what is Sinema Remote Connect, what are those main building blocks, is it secure? That's obviously a very pertinent question in today's world, always has been, and we're getting more and more queries about the security sort of side of such remote access. Lewis will do a demo showing you how it works with some great examples of that, and at the end we'll have a Q&A session. So what is it? What is it, and what are the main building blocks behind it? So the primary part of the application is it's server. It's a server-based application, and like other remote access systems, with Sinema Remote Connect you can decide to host that on-site in your own environment or off-site. So that could be like within Amazon or that similar type of hosting application or environment. We find in today's world that most customers like the idea of the server, and hence the application and all the data being hosted on site. You have complete control physically where that server is going to be located, and therefore you've got more control over it than others that are hosted off-site. So with ours, it's very simple. You install it on your own environment. It is secure. Naturally, we're going to say it's secure. Lewis will go into a bit more detail about the security mechanisms that are used, but in principle, every single connection between the remote sites, the person wants to log on, and therefore the server interconnections are all encrypted with VPN tunnels, and it's one of the highest levels of encryption between all those devices and those locations. We also believe it's really, really easy to set up and easy to install and modify. Now, we appreciate in today's world that not everyone is an IT expert. We want to make sure this is easy to set up and simple to use. And simple to use means that after you've installed it and it's commissioned and it's up and running, you want to make sure it's simple to add remote sites, to maybe change the client, change their user privileges or reduce their privileges, or maybe very quickly reduce people's privileges. That might be because of an ex-employee or an employee with a grudge. So some people use remote access not purely for accessing remote sites, but even maybe if a remote site could be facility in a factory, they want to ensure that only the correct people are accessing equipment in the factory. So again, Sinema Remote Connect also is an additional layer of security when you want to connect devices locally. We also appreciate in today's world there are multiple connections out there in the field. So when we talk about the field, those are the remote sites. So we've got the ability to connect via 3G and 4G, via ADSL, good old broadband, or if so the customer might have their own internal network, so we can connect via their internal network, passing the data through the company's own secure firewall. So do a bit more digging and a bit more detail into those remote sites and those remote connections. So with good old broadband and ADSL, we've done lots of testing here in the UK, and we've tested it with our gateways that connect to ADSL or broadband via BT, Sky and TalkTalk. So what that really means is it's fully tested with on the OpenReach lines. Now, of course, the BTs and the Skys of this world always want customers to use their own equipment. So there are some hidden settings that OpenReach or Sky don't really tell you about, but we've worked and understood those, so it enables us to connect our routers to OpenReach lines. We've done lots of testing with that. So it's worth also remembering that in addition to this being the remote gateway for your remote access, is that the hardware also acts as a firewall. On the cellular side, we've got 3G and 4G routers. They work with a majority of the SIM cards. So some examples is that we, right in the far northwest of England, where there is very, very poor broadband coverage, we have a farmer using one of our 4G routers here with a monthly £20 unlimited broadband, and he uses that to gain internet access for his entire farm, running around about 20 megabits rather than broadband, which was getting less than half a meg. So we've used these with, I think that's with EE, using a standard SIM card. We also can operate with a machine-to-machine SIM card providers who will provide you a SIM that can roam on any UK network or any network in the whole of the world. Therefore, you can put the SIM in, you can ship the router anywhere in the world, and it will connect to a local network, and you still get the bill and connectivity from the local provider here in the UK. It's worth remembering again that that cellular gateway will also act as a firewall, plus enables connectivity to Sinema Remote Connect. And the final connectivity method is via the customer's network. We understand that lots of customers might not have broadband going right into the factory gate or coming up into the production floor, and similarly they don't like the idea of having 3G and 4G as a backdoor connectivity into the factory, so they want to ensure that any remote access goes through the customer's network. So again, we can do that with a local area network connection, and again, that in addition to enabling Sinema Remote Connect to talk to a machine, it also acts as a firewall. So for the remote sites, we can talk via broadband or ADSL, via cellular network, and also using the customer's own network directly. We then look at the server. So the most typical question we get is, what is the minimum requirements and the standard requirements for the application to be loaded on? So right in front of you there gives you an idea of the typical application, so the typical server requirements. You can use less than that. We've done it on slower machines. It just literally means the application is slower. So naturally, the faster the machine, the quicker the connection will be made, and the more efficient it will be if you're having multiple connections. This is a licensed product, so every single device on the network that is using Sinema Remote Connect will need a license key. That's a physical key that is plugged onto the bottom of those routers on the previous slide. It's a license key that is used for the client software, and it's a license key that is used on the server. Every single connection, as I touched on beforehand, operates over VPN, and therefore each VPN tunnel also requires a license. And a little bit later, we'll touch on how you can buy packs of those keys and those licenses to enable connectivity. The final bit, obviously, is the client. So this is the bit of software that you either ask your employee to download, or you give it to your employee, or you give this to your customer. So every single person who wants to gain access to the remote site, i.e. log on to the server, and in turn the server checks their credentials and logs them onto the remote site, will need a piece of client software. And again, that client will need a license to enable connectivity to the server. So those are three main elements. You have the remote side, you've got the server, and you've got the client software. So three main core elements to enable remote connectivity. So typical applications of a user, this is a very, very brief touch on this, is that using a username and password, again, the user can access the server and start, if they have the privileges, can start making changes to the settings within the server if they wish to, and hence that user is assigned rights and privileges that enable certain connectivity paths. There are two different tunnels that Lewis will touch on later, but basically is that, as you can see here, that when the user connects to the server, it opens up a tunnel to enable secure connection. So it really highlights, in a very high level, what the user's privileges have and how users can connect to the server and in turn connect to remote locations or remote devices. So big question we asked today is Sinema Remote Connect secure? As you can see on the right hand side, you can see in the orange, if you can see the colors on your screen, you can see that the orange highlights secure VPN tunnels going from the client through to the server. The server then checks their credentials and then opens up tunnels from the server down to each one of those endpoints. In relation to those endpoints, you can see that there are various different technology being used. We have the Scalance SC models on the far right-hand side. You've got the mobile units. On the left-hand side, we even have a unit that enables connectivity to a Profibus network. So the majority of applications uses Ethernet, so we're connecting to a panel or a cell, or maybe even connecting to an entire factory using IP or Ethernet. We also understand that not everyone's panel is using the latest protocols. So we have the ability to connect to a good old-fashioned Profibus network. So to touch on that, a VPN is established between each connection. In addition, relatively recently, we have this ability to add a further level of security by talking to a jump host. That is for certain customers and clients who want some additional security. So you had to log on to the first server, the first server checks their credentials before it then passes that on to the Sinema Remote Connect client. And that therefore enhances security for remote access. So here's a general overview of the typical remote access client. And again, depending on the use case, you can use a cellular full roaming SIM, and you can deploy these remote devices anywhere in the world. So we have the ability to talk via a company network in the bottom left-hand quadrant. We have the 3G and the 4G units on the right, on the bottom right, and on the 6 o'clock position, and then we have the unit talking to via also a customer's line on the right-hand side. The interesting thing about this is that people often ask about either further enhancing their security when they're talking to a remote device. So I touched on beforehand that you have to have a key plug which has a license in. So some people decide that they're not too happy about the device sitting there being on all the time. So the first thing they do is they take the key plug out of that Scalance router and lock it away or put it next to the panel, somewhere secure. As it hasn't got a license, there is no connection to that device. We've even had instances where they actually physically power the unit down as well with a key. So the Scalance AM not only has the key plug removed, the power is also turned off. So again, everyone does things slightly differently with remote access. It is secure, and we're just highlighting here some of the different areas that you can enhance your security. The final bit to chat on before Lewis does his demo is it's certified to 62443, which is one of the latest security standards, just to prove the point that what we're offering here is very secure and has been tested and validated. Now over to you, Lewis. Maybe Lewis, you can introduce yourself, and good luck with your demonstration.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
And can you see my screen? Yeah. Is that all okay?
Yes. Yes. Good.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So Yeah, my name's Lewis Dark. I'm a network and communication specialist based in Manchester. I deal with anything from Sinema Remote Connect connections, the scalance range, as well as PLC comms, and that kind of thing. So a couple of things that I want to touch on first before we go anywhere. We've touched on licenses. We have promotional packages with Sinema Remote Connect, and one of the kind of popular ones to introduce people to how it works is our basic software package, and this is the Remote Connect server, 4 connections and 1 client. The way Sinema Remote Connect works is you have a client PC and you have the server there, and it's certificate based on or fingerprint based, where you would establish the connection, requesting to say access this S7-1500 over here. You have your certificate come through, goes to the server, make sure that the fingerprint matches on the device here, and the connection can be established. You can see there that you've got upgrades that increase those connections and so on. But yeah, that's just a quick overview of that. What I'm going to show you today is the Sinema server, how it works and some features that we've got there, and then a connection via our Sinema Remote Connect client to our office in Manchester, and I'll show you some things that we can do with that. So firstly, this is what the server page looks like. Our server is actually running on a virtual machine. Provided that you meet the installation requirements for the server, you can have it on a VM, you can have it on a standalone PC, but it does need to, this will only run the Sinema server. There's no additional software running on this. This is just the server where you create your connections. So these are the list of devices that we've added in, and we've got listed here. Each of these is a separate Scalance SC device in our room, in our rooms here. So you can see, you can assign them locations. So this would be your management system. You could have these across the country. Ours are all on different in one room in the office, but you get a status to let you know that when they're online and offline. And you can see we've got all the subnets listed here as well. These are the ones that are local to the devices in the site. These are then virtual subnets that are created by the Sinema server. You've got different connection types. I'm just going to go into our top device here and show you some of the features that we've got. So when you create a device, you go through all these steps and procedures. So you can see that we've got different types of devices that we can connect to. So all of these devices do support the Sinema Remote Connect solution. There are some requirements for doing it. With the standard S615s and the M800s, you do require a key plug, which is an additional cost, but you pop it into the device and you can then work with Sinema Remote Connect with that. As was mentioned, there are 2 different types of VPN settings. We've got OpenVPN and IPsec. They're both secure, and but they do require slightly different configuration methods. Not too difficult to make those implementations, but they are there as an option. Some devices don't all support OpenVPN, some devices don't support IPsec. So you've got the option to be flexible with that. A feature that's quite handy in this as well is the type of connection, which is either permanent, meaning that it will be on constantly. If it loses its connection, it will go offline. And it will stay offline until the connection is re-established. And that could be a wire break, that could be anything like that. It could be a change in times and that kind of thing. The other option, which is quite useful if you want to have more control over your VPN connections, is to use the digital input. This means that you can trigger an input to start the VPN or stop it as and when you like, allowing you to have that flexibility with what you who's connected when. Talking about who is connected and when, we have our user accounts here. So these are a list of all the users that are connected to their devices. So we can see that Dave Adams is currently online to a device. That's his address. And all of these people will have a separate client license. Okay, so each of these have a field PG, and they will be able to connect to these devices through their client software. An important part of the system as well is to be able to make sure that you know who's connected when. And in this regard, we have a log file. Same way we have PLC's diagnostics, we have a log file to let us know when people have logged in and logged out. And so we can see people have signed in today, on and off. If we go down a little bit, maybe if we go to the next page, you can see where I connected in earlier on this morning, and for the same thing. Important part is your backup and restore, so we can actually create backup copies of the entire configuration. So should anything happen to our server, we can actually save a backup, send it to a network location, and reload it in without any issues. Once it's reloaded in, the connections can be remade to our devices here. Okay, so that's a quick overview of what is on the Sinema server. What I can show you now is actually the Sinema client. So we don't need this open at the moment. We can close this off, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you a connection, see how quickly this can be made. So this is the separate RC client software. I'm just going to sign back in. I got a message just to let me know I'm working on a slightly different version, but for what we're doing, it's absolutely fine. So at the moment, I'm offline. We can see that I'm connecting through the same URL to our server remotely. And you can see that we've got the list of devices here that we have available. I'm actually going to connect to this top one. You've got different types of connection. You've got yes and network address translation. I'm using the network address translation so that we can see I'm working on this 192.168 network. If I was to do yes, we can connect through on the 172 network. But you can see we go through this process of authentication, retrieving the VPN configuration, and then establishing that connection to this device. So if we look on this page, we can see that my name's here. I'm currently not connected apparently, but what I can do is I just click off this page and I click back. I'm now established a connection, and it's got the same VPN address here matching. So it knows that I'm connected. It doesn't tell us what I'm connected to. The server doesn't need to know that. It just needs to know that I have an online connection. What we can do now actually then is actually go to our web browser. If we just, before I do this, we see that we're on the 192.168.203.0 network. In our Digital Experience Center, we are actually connected to our one of our Scalance devices in there. And what we can do is actually search the IP address of the PLC because we've enabled the web server. So if I do 192.168.203.1 and I press enter, we've got here our Simatic S7-1500, and we're connected online directly to that area. So here you can see we've actually go into the diagnostic buffer. Everything's running, the same as if we were connected locally now, and we can see all the information. So if you've been in our Digital Experience Center, this is our wire break where we have the two cogs rotating, and we can see that the last time we did that experiment was on the 20th of March. All of this is live. So again, if we were to actually cause an issue on site in the demo room and take a cable out, we'd actually get this information live as well. This is all well and good, showing us connected to a device for its web server, but customers obviously like to use their software and do diagnostics. So we can actually do go online in TIA portal and make modifications and do downloads. I'm not going to do a download, but we can go online. You have to use the extended go online option though. The reason for this is because we're now working on the layer above MAC addresses, so layer 3. We can't use a search because we need to work with the exact IP addresses. So you can see I've already done this today, but we've got searching for this IP address and only this IP address now because we know that that's what we're connecting to. Can take a moment. But there it is. There's the main controller. It's a 1515 TF, and we're connecting in, so we can click Go Online. And any second now. Here we go. So we get the connection being made, we've got the green tick, and because I had just put a blank PLC in there, we can actually now see the program blocks that are not within my project. So if we wanted to, we can actually do an upload and drag those blocks out and work with them as if they were here locally. And I think that's kind of a quick overview of what is possible with Sinema Remote Connect and establishing a connection. And as I said, it's mainly for us to be able to access these devices remotely and be able to work on them as if we were there locally.
Thank you, Lewis. So there's a couple of other things to touch on, is that on other applications. So it's quite common that people want to connect to machines that are remote. Obviously, those machines are in other countries, and they might have a customer that suddenly requested to them that they want to do suddenly wants to connect to that machine. And what you can do is you can get the cellular unit or the ADSL unit. You can test it next to your environment now, so you can test it to prove it all works. You then put it in a box, send it to the customer's site. The customer will then just take it out of the box, power it up, and then because the connection is from the remote device into the server, it connects that way. Once that connection is made, you can finalize and complete your connection remotely using the Sinema software. So that does enable you to simplify if you've got customers out in the field that you can't get to site, but you want to gain remote access. The second point is sort of promotional packages that we have. So we have a range of promotional packages that enable you to get going with Sinema Remote Connect. So promotional package can be the client software, the server software, the relevant licenses, the relevant VPNs, and also you have an option whether to go for a 4G router or an ADSL router. So those promotional packages enable you to kickstart your remote access application if you wish to go down that route. And that really runs through our main sort of presentation and demonstration. So it's open to the floor if anyone's got any questions.